FanDuel Punch Out. I'm Jason Gilbo at JGilbo11. With me is Russell Clay at Russell J. Clay. Taking a look at the FanDuel slate tonight, 15-gamer. Got ourselves a Coors game. Leicester back on the bumps, so we got our cash game guy. But definitely some GPP options down low that kind of helps us build a little bit bat-heavy lineups.
And we did the pitcher breakdown for those of you that are interested in that type of stuff. But Leicester is the main cash option, but I think for tournaments there's a lot of opportunity to pay down and get a little wacky with these the lineup construction here.
Yeah, definitely. One guy we were kind of intrigued with on FanDuel was Matt Whistler going up against the Phillies for 6K. Kind of just lets you do whatever you want with the lineup.
Yeah, exactly. That defines it pretty much.
Jumping right into catcher here, Wellington Castillo obviously priced up due to being at Coors. Big fan of his against the lefty Chris Russin, 4,100. Not that bad of a price tag for him. I know it's expensive for a catcher, but he's been red hot. I like him in the spot against Russin. One of the few Diamondbacks righties who we'll be definitely taking a look at.
Yeah, I think that's a fair price for him. Obviously, it's a little inflated, but it's inflated for good reasons. So I'm okay with that.
Yeah, definitely. Russin, 367 WOBA allowed, 1.09 home runs per 9 since 2014 of righties. Castillo, obviously, a guy who can go off. Dropping down the list here.
Buster Posey.
Yeah,
3,300. I think that's a very intriguing price, even though he struggled of late. It wasn't a week ago that he was doing awesome. So I wouldn't worry about this last week and take sort of the last few years of sample size instead of just 1 week, So I think he's still a great play.
Yeah, I mean, he's crushed lefties. Obviously, Haps had a decent season, but 317 WOBA allowed to right-handers since 2014, so he hasn't been tremendous. And it's usually a price tag we don't get Posey at when facing left-handers. One guy here, Victor Martinez, going up against Joe Ross, an interesting one just because Victor Martinez is eligible at catcher, so it kind of puts things into play here for me. Ross, 341 WOBA allowed to lefties. I don't mind him in tournaments. I think he's an interesting option tonight.
Interesting. Good call. McCann, 3K. I think that's an interesting player. He's batting third in the lineup now, so I think at 3K, that's a reasonable value.
Yeah, coming off a homer last night, going to face Medlin face Medlin here. I think, as you said, I mean, 3K, it's not a bad price tag for a catcher hitting third in Yankee Stadium.
And then our boy, Real Muto, who ran in front of somebody last night to get his home run called back for 2,700. I love this Marlins lineup again tonight, and they're all pretty solidly valued. So he's a good way to start off.
Yeah, definitely. And one guy we talked about here too, as well as Stephen Vogt going up against O'Sullivan. And Vogt, kind of that deep GPP play. I think you're going to get him at low ownership, but obviously going up against Sullivan. 466 WOBA allowed, 3.41 runs per 9. That's the definition of gas can is just Sean O'Sullivan's face, and he's pitching for my Sox tonight, so this should be a fun one.
That is a minor league pitcher right there, basically pitching in the majors.
Yeah, this is it won't be fun, and we'll talk about plenty of ace bats, but obviously the other side of that game as well too. But anyone else you're looking at catcher, I think to see about as low as you'll go.
Yeah, not really. I think that's about as low as I'm going with those two. I think that's plenty low enough and a pretty solid value.
Yeah, definitely. First base here, things get a little bit interesting because we got really a lot of guys up top that are in great spots. Goldschmidt, not the most expensive pitcher on this slate, not the most expensive first baseman on this slate, and 300 less than Rizzo in Coors against a lefty. Goldschmidt's 4,500 doesn't weigh that much of an impact on me. I have no problem sliding him in any format.
That is perfectly fine with me. The one that stands out is Rizzo. That's on DraftKings, it's a little different because guys were still priced over him, so everyone was inflated together. It seems like he got inflated without everyone else getting totally inflated. So I'm probably not touching him. I mean, the Cubs stack as we always say, is in play. But unless you're doing that, he's basically untouchable for me.
Yeah, I definitely agree. And one guy we were looking at, Ortiz. Yes, lefty-lefty matchup, but Woba over 350, ISO over 200 against Southpaws this season. Certainly an interesting swerve down off of Goldschmidt and Rizzo.
Mhm.
Um, and I think once again that Red Sox stack is going to be in play, and hopefully it's more in front of the top of the order than it was last night.
Yeah, I love that price for Abreu too. I think him and Ortiz are in the same tier tonight.
Yeah, Abreu with the lefty in Texas, that's definitely favorable. Then we start kind of dropping down, and Encarnacion's a guy you're a fan of at 3,500 going up against your boy Matt Cain.
Yeah, I think the Toronto stack's really in play tonight for both sites, and he's a good way to start it off at only 3,500.
Yeah, I mean that's pretty cheap in comparison to the other first base options.
Mm-hmm.
Anyone else you're kind of looking at? Justin Bour, I mean another Miami guy who was in a decent spot against Davies. I definitely don't mind him.
Yeah, other than that, it's kind of tough. I mean, Marwin Gonzalez is a guy to keep an eye on. I don't necessarily think he's a great play tonight, but he is only 2,700 and he has been doing pretty well lately in terms of a small sample size perspective. So someone to keep in mind maybe if you need a deep punt at first, but hopefully you don't need a deep punt at first because there's some solid options tonight.
Yeah, I mean, three last four games, he has two hits, been cruising double-digit FanDuel points in three of those four. So, yeah, I mean, that's definitely a name to really drop there. Moving to second base, and this one a little bit more easier to break down on FanDuel because there are some guys and they were kind of overinflated when we looked at DraftKings prices, a lot of
Yeah.
those names. But here tonight, I mean, I'm not a big fan of Zobrist's new price tag. I think he's a guy I'll fade. But Daniel Murphy's a guy who I'll be looking at 38K. I think if I'm paying up, it's going to be for Murphy.
I like that call. That's a pretty good price. And yeah, as you mentioned, if you do play both DraftKings and FanDuel, this is a night to sort of scope out both sites because they are very, very different in terms of who's inflated and who's not. So that's definitely something to take into account. And maybe you only play one tonight. But yeah, so I like him. I think Pedroia is solidly priced at 3,400. I think that's again a game to target, and he's pretty reasonable.
Yeah, definitely. And if you want to drop lower, I mean, there's some guys that maybe have some names.
So Brandon Phillips is a big difference. He's only 2,900 on FanDuel, and he's not in a great spot. But again, for what he's kind of been doing, I think that's a decent roll of the dice there.
Yeah, and then you got Dietrich right there at 2,800,
Yeah.
who's going to be the chalk, probably second baseman play tonight. I expect him to be the highest owned. But obviously, with the way he's been playing, that's not a bad thing. And I don't really care about ownership from a guy who's, producing at 2,800. That can be different elsewhere.
Definitely agree.
Anyone else you're looking at? I mean, that's once again, I think Dietrich kind of hits the where we stop.
I think we're locking him in, and sometimes that happens. That's the lock. There's no reason to go lower than that.
Yeah, definitely. Moving to third base, and this one, not a lot of versatility where you can put three of them at different positions like DraftKings. So paying up, who are, I'll put you on the spot, Arenado, Bryant, Machado, who are you taking?
Yeah, I have to go Arenado here, and he's not even in the best spot. But I do like him the best. With price considered, I like Machado just because he's such a great standalone value right now. But then I looked like one below, and I see my boy Josh Donaldson sitting there at 4,100, and I'm kind of in on that. He's obviously not the strongest option and not the strongest out of any of those, but I do like this stack tonight. So.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I think Machado, is the guy I'm looking at, just price considered, 4,300, 1,000 less than Arenado. And I know it's target field, but obviously the way Machado's hitting this season, righty on righty matchup against the young one, it's tough to fade. And Bryant's the only guy I'm working in, really into stacks here.
Yeah, just like Rizzo. Because, I mean, and you wouldn't really want to play Rizzo without him,
Yeah,
so.
I think that's just how it only works for the Cubs with me at this point.
Yeah.
Because they are so expensive, and they are expensive stack, but certainly in play because Bryant's been crushing. But I think going down a little bit cheaper, Todd Frazier coming off a big night. His ownership may be a little bit higher on FanDuel here just because he has a decent sized price difference from guys like Bryant and those guys we just talked about.
Yep.
And Drury's right there at 3,800. So I think his ownership, even coming off a 2-homer night, is going to be pretty low.
Yeah, and then I think you look at Drury and Lamb, and hey, I mean, Diamondbacks stack paid off last night. I think it's a pretty good shot it pays off again tonight. So they're not killing you with these salaries here.
Yeah, those two are kind of the value in that situation. If you want to go down cheaper, you can look at Adrian Beltre, but Martin Prado's another Marlins guy we like for cheap tonight, hitting second in the order.
Yeah, and below that, I don't think you should really go lower. Aaron Hill staring at you with the 3 homers, but he's not going to do that again anytime soon. So don't worry about him.
Oh, now he's hitting 2 for you tonight for sure. Yeah, I mean he's in play for me if you want to be different. I mean, we get 2 games in between that big 70-pointer, but still,
yeah,
I mean, a guy against a lefty, I don't mind him as a cheap play. Especially if you're building multiple lineups.
Basically what Russell Westbrook does on a good night, 70 points. Jesus.
Yeah, I know. That's Anthony Davis on Christmas right there. Looking at shortstop, and you got another Rockies guy heading up top here, Trevor Story.
Yeah.
Just 500 more than Bogarts and 400 more than Correa. It kind of makes things a little bit interesting. I'm a big fan of Bogarts tonight with the lefty in Fenway, but also you can't knock Story at home either.
Yeah, again, he's 4,500 for good reason. And Bogarts, I love that price. He's been awesome this entire year, and he's in a great spot tonight. So I love paying up for him.
Yeah, I mean, the one thing that I don't like about shortstops on FanDuel tonight is, well, one, you got Gene Segura there at 3,700, who comes in as one of the top options for me. But then you have Cozart, Russell, Villar, who I thought were great values on the other side, DraftKings there, but really priced up, and Rollins all over 3K. They don't quite carry the same price, points per dollar value as they do on the other site there.
Mm-hmm.
Which is disappointing because there might be one spot where you want to punt that could be shortstop, and you can't really do that because you don't feel good about any of these guys down here.
I mean, unless you're going with a Marlins stack, and then Hechiavaria, he had 3 hits last night, and I think in terms of that Marlins stack, if you're looking, he's 2,100. So I think that could play out again. But other than that, yeah, I totally agree.
Yeah, I think Rollins is about as low as I'll go there, hitting second.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, Segura at 3,700. I mean, that's a steal for a guy who's, going through allergy season.
God bless you.
Yeah.
Well, is he cash for you?
Segura, oh, for sure. At that price tag, I have no problem. I mean, 800 cheaper than Story for a guy hitting leadoff in Coors against a weak lefty. Yeah.
Right.
He comes in as top for me. I love Bogarts as a nice pivot, though.
Right.
Outfield, I think this is where you can look at some top options, but I think FanDuel carries a lot of value here in outfield too. So you don't necessarily have to feel inclined in paying up. But obviously, guys like Blackman, Gonzalez, and Parra certainly in play. And Gonzalez, I know he kind of killed everyone last night, but they're not that expensive in comparison to what they usually are.
No, this isn't too bad. I actually think this is pretty reasonably priced. I don't think you want to pay up for Trout right now. Stanton's been all right, but I think he's an interesting guy if you're stacking Marlins, but probably not as a standalone. So yeah, I think once you get down there, you look at Blackman, I think that's a fair value for him.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, you have some guys in that mid-range too. Yelich, Eaton, Nelson Cruz was a guy who kind of intrigued us just going up against the lefty. I know Smiley's been good and Cruz really hasn't, but at that price tag still against the lefties, he'll pop up on the radar.
Yeah. And I mean, then you even look down a little bit. Yelich, Trumbo, Springer, all in a row there. I think they're all pretty solid values as well.
Yeah, definitely. Reddick, 3,200 against O'Sullivan tonight's going to be a guy who I think is going to pay off that price tag pretty handsomely.
Yeah.
I mean, he's been great. I mean, look at his last few games here. Obviously, he's hitting well, and I mean, overall, I mean, you're looking at what he's 2 to 5, 3 to 5, 4 for 4, 3 for 3, 1 for 4 last night with 2 RBIs. So um, get on him while that price tag's still relatively low.
Right. And then if you're doing the Toronto thing with me against Matt Cain and our pitchforks, Michael Saunders 3K. So
Definitely. And how do you feel about Billy Burns if he's hitting leadoff again tonight?
I'm doing it. I mean, my Oakland and Toronto are going to be my main sort of. They're relatively cheap compared to the Coors. So obviously Coors takes the cake compared to what stacking, but I think they're in play and they're cheap. So that's what I'm looking at.
Yeah. You got a couple Tampa platoon outfielders here, Steve Pearce and Brandon Guyer, both facing Wade Miley. Miley 3.32 WOBA allowed since 2014. The Rays do have a top 10 WOBA against lefties, so I mean, you're being a little bit different here, but I actually don't mind him as kind of a punt play here, just to get one if you need to fit into Coors outfielders or something like that.
Right.
So, anyone else down here that you really need to drop down here? I mean, Matt Holliday.
Not really, but I mean, Coco Crisp 2,600. He's obviously doing well. He's going to do well in this series. So,
Adam Jones 2,300. I mean, I've never seen this price this low.
That is pretty insane. I think that makes a Baltimore stack kind of interesting for me. If you can get him at that cheap, that might make the rest of them a little more valuable. So,
and you look at Ricard, I mean, he's down there on the list too as far as price. So it's like you compare two cheap outfielders up, Machado, and kind of load up on other spots.
Yeah.
If you do work in a mini Baltimore stack with a Coors and a decent price pitcher, and you're in a good spot.
I think that's an interesting play for FanDuel.
Yeah,
especially
definitely.
if you're paying up for Lester. Gives you some extra cap.
Yeah, definitely. So that's going to wrap it up here with the FanDuel Punch Out. Be sure to check out dailyfantasycafe.com for all our great tools and content.